Happy New Year, Wargaming fans. I'm Greg, joined by Dave, and we are going to be doing a rule review for Valour and Fortitude, the free set of Napoleonic big battle rules written by Jervis Johnson and the Perrys. What was that? I think summer or fall of 2022?
Yeah, that draft I think was finished in August.
Okay, so it's a very new game. Mm-hmm. Just before Christmas, Dave and I did a how to play video where we kind of walked you through a turn and we talked a lot about the mechanics, teaching you how the game unfolds. Today, we're going to be a little bit more subjective in nature, and we're going to talk about things that we liked and didn't like in Valour and Fortitude. In order to structure that conversation, we'll go through our usual categories, and we always start, Dave, with presentation.
So originally the rules were available on the Perry website, and then they made a decision, which I love, to include a free copy of a printed version of the rules, because I'm the type of person that prefers printed things, in the October issue of Wargames Illustrated. So I immediately bought it, and
Same.
just to have my little packet of rules. And not only do you get the rules, but you also got a nice Q&A, which is really designer notes for why they made the choices that they did and how they came about with the rule set that they did. And the rules themselves are very text heavy.
Yeah, yes they are.
And I understand why they did this, and that was that really the whole crux of this was, could you make a set of rules that was 4 pages long?
And they did.
And to the letter of the rule, you can't go over 4 pages, really, so you don't have space for pictures.
No.
I personally would have preferred an 8, 10, 20 pages with pictures.
And maybe slightly larger font.
And diagrams, yeah, and some bigger font for old people like myself. So for presentation, I did kind of punish it. I gave it a 4.
Okay.
And I think that in the future, if they went back and revisited that decision, I would think that they would want to make it a little prettier and a little bit easier to read on old eyes.
Well, I think there's a chance that they might go back and revisit it, because if you recall, a year or two ago, Andy Callan's Nevermind the Billhooks was also released as a free set of rules in a Wargames Illustrated issue, and just recently we got the deluxe, beautiful printed version of that, which is a much nicer version, so maybe Valour and Fortitude will get the same treatment. I'm on the same page with you in terms of my score. I'm actually a little lower. I went 3 out of 10. Well below average. And you noted there are 2 ways that you can get this game. You can still go to perryminiatures.com and download the PDF and just print it off at home. And that's what I'm looking at here. And this is how I first saw the game. And I was really excited to get the magazine version, thinking like, oh, you know, that's going to be all prettied up. Wargames Illustrated has great layouts, great photography. I saw the cover, and I was like, yes, you know, this is sweet. And then I opened it up, and it was like, it's exactly the same as the PDF version. Not any nicer at all, which was really shocking. Also, now at this point, it's completely out of date. Because there have been, I think, at least 4 revisions. It's when you go to perryminiatures.com, it's almost like a living rule set.
Right.
They're regularly updating it with new information, with changes. So the version in Wargames Illustrated is now 2 or 3 versions behind where we are. Now we move to playability. How quick is it to play? How easy is it to teach somebody to play? And as you might imagine, for a 4-page game, playability is pretty good, I think, Dave.
Yeah, they were aiming for a simple rule set that can get a battle done in a reasonable amount of time. I can say that as I age, the ripe old age of 50 that I am, as I age, I really appreciate streamlined rule sets that are easy for me to remember and that I can get done in an evening, as opposed to having to devote 8 hours or 10 hours of a day to play.
Right.
So for playability, I gave this an 8. You might give it a lower score, but I think that they did a wonderful job setting out to do what they wanted to do, and that it is extremely playable, and it's not going to turn off people that don't have the historical background of Napoleonics.
I completely agree, and I mean, everything that you said makes me wonder why you didn't score it higher than an 8, because the game, to be clear, is free, so it's extremely accessible. It's 4 pages, really short, really easy to teach people, and it's fast. I mean, we regularly have been able to finish our scenarios in under 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And for somebody, we do have members of our club who aren't as into Napoleonics as you and I are. And for them, I think they've said it's a very approachable game. This doesn't turn them off to trying Napoleonics.
Yeah, our club has played at least 2 other Napoleonic rule sets within the past 6 to 8 months. And I can honestly tell you that these rules play better.
Oh, yeah.
And give me a far more enjoyable game than the other 2 rule sets, which will not be named, that we have recently played.
Yes. That's all the good stuff. Yeah. I do think we should point out in this playability category, there is some not good stuff, in my opinion. I still gave it a pretty good score. I went 7 out of 10. But I did ding it for a few reasons. Number 1, the number of figures, presumably, that you need to play this game as written is extremely high. And if you look at the photos in Wargames Illustrated in the articles, I mean, you can see the Perrys, their beautiful 12-foot-long table with, 1,028 mil figures. The basic scenarios that you need to do this require a pretty decent-sized collection.
You're looking at 24 to 36 figures per battalion.
Yes, you could scale it down, and we play in 15 mil, but when we get to mechanics, we'll touch on one of the reasons why you need a lot of stuff, because units go away very quickly in this game. So if you played a small scenario, it would be over in an hour. So you do need a lot of miniatures in order to play this game, which I found, for a beginner kind of game, I think could be difficult. We have a large collection in this club, but if you're watching this review and you don't have a large collection, Valour and Fortitude might be a little tricky for you. The other big ding that I had to give it is for what appeared to be, at first glance to me, a very lovely QRS. Unlike the rules, it's spaced in normal-sized font. It's really easy to read. It's a single page, and I saw this and thought, oh, fantastic. Except you can't actually play the game from this one-page QRS. It doesn't take you through the game chronologically. If you were a new player, you could not learn how to play the game just from this. And I also don't like the way that it's even organized. There are modifiers that are mixed up with each other, so the firing and the combat modifiers are put in the same table, sometimes on the same line, even though you don't use them at the same point in the game. We ended up totally redoing the QRS. I think we mentioned this in our How to Play video. Our redone version is also a single page, but it takes you through the game chronologically, each phase at a time, and the information that you need to play that phase of the game appears on that section of the QRS. Mm-hmm. So I found this to be both confusing and disappointing from a playability standpoint. So I think you said you were an 8?
8.
I was a 7. Both pretty good scores. Mm-hmm. And I'm really interested to hear where you're going to go in mechanics.
Let me start by saying that I gave it a good score in mechanics. And the reason I gave it a good score in mechanics is because for the type of game that they are designing, for the type of audience that they are designing, and the time limit that you want to play these games in, I thought the rules themselves were extremely smooth and that they were intuitive. There weren't things that were difficult to wrap your head around. There weren't any major questions that came up during the rules.
No.
But with that, you have an extremely, we'll say, fluid movement system.
It's very generous.
You're basically moving from point A to point B. There's no need for a turn gauge, that's for sure.
Cavalry can move 18 inches, and you get 2 moves a turn.
Right.
So it's, 3 feet you can move in a single turn. So again, this gets back to the whole, what do you need in order to play? You need a lot of miniatures, and as written, you need a huge freaking table. I mean, you better be playing this on a ping pong table.
Now, we have been fortunate enough to see the Perry's table.
It is very lovely.
And it is as big as a ping pong table, if not bigger.
Bigger.
And they play in 28s even. The move distances, I think, still are fine. There are a lot of games out there that have almost like telescoping movement where units can move very rapidly. And you can't actually move within 3 inches of an enemy unit anyway without actually
engaging,
assaulting them.
Right.
But it didn't cause problems because both groups were able to do it.
And I understand the philosophy. I mean, when you read the design notes, the philosophy was, hey, let's get to the fight.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is supposed to be a quick game, so this is what you mentioned, that this is what makes, I think, mechanics so hard. How am I scoring it? For the design intent, I think they did a really good job. It's a 4-page game. And like you said, it's very smooth. But since it's a 4-page game, sometimes I think it leaves a little bit to be desired. And if you want to know exactly how a turn unfolds, we don't need to rehash that here because just before Christmas, we already made a video that takes you through step by step every turn. A very brief summary for you here. The sequence of a turn is really simple. It's 4 steps, right? Step 1, you draw a fate card, which is a random card from a deck that has maybe some special abilities on it that allow you to do something unique, break the rules. Step 2 is firing. Firing comes first. If you decide to fire, you cannot move. And this is a bucket of D6 game. 4 or better is a hit. It's a very quick process. Then you go to action, where you activate all of the units. A unit in this game is a battalion, and a group of them is a brigade. So if you're thinking about what that means in terms of scale, like as a player, you'd be running at least a division, maybe even a small corps. Ideally, you would have several brigades under your command. During the action phase is when you roll to activate them, you move them, you engage in melee, which is the final step, resolving the melee. And that is how you end the turn. It is an I go, you go game, which is a little bit of a complaint from me. I wish that the activation system was a little bit more give and take, a little more dynamic, rather than Army A does everything, and then Army B does everything. I think that's a little bit of an old school mechanic that I wish we'd gotten away from a little bit. That said, I do understand in a big convention setting, it's actually a lot easier to run a game that way. Much easier.
Yeah, and from the mechanics point of view, there is a mechanic in there that once your brigade takes, I believe it's 3 setbacks. There's a really good chance you're going to lose that whole brigade.
Yeah, and this gets back to the point we made a couple of minutes ago about why you need so much stuff. Units go away in this game like alarmingly fast. Your entire brigade can just melt away with 1 die roll if you've taken a few setbacks.
You take 3 setbacks.
You're making a die roll.
You could have over half of your brigade still in good shape, and it's going to choose to leave.
Yes. We had a couple of players in our initial sessions of this that were alarmed that huge holes were opening. Again, if you go back to the design notes, they do explain why they chose to do that. They want the game to get to a resolution. They want stuff to happen. Napoleonic battles are often like a very grinding, attritional affair. And boy, in this rule set, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen quick.
As far as the mechanics go, I based my score of mechanics on really what they were trying to do and how well they did that. And so I actually ended up giving it an 8.
Okay, I debated an 8. I ended up going 7, but I think we're on the same page here. Something else that I do look at when I think about mechanics is, innovation. Is there anything in here I haven't seen before that's unique? That is definitely not the case, to be clear, in Valour and Fortitude. If you have ever played Black Powder, also written by Jervis Johnson, and worked on by the Perrys, this is extremely similar mechanically to Black Powder. I like it better than Black Powder, actually. I think that Black Powder could have done all this in a few pages, which is what they've done in Valour and Fortitude.
The 4th category that we look at is historical fluff, accuracy, whatever you want to call it. And so when you look at this set of rules, there isn't, in my opinion, a whole lot of that historical nitty-gritty minutia that really flavors that Napoleonic warfare.
It's 4 pages.
Correct.
How much are you going to get in 4 pages?
So what you're going to find is that the Perrys are releasing army lists, and the army lists include a fate table for each of the nations. And they include, in a sense, the historical flavor through those two things. A lot of the fate tables have the same regardless of nationality.
With a couple differences.
And there's a couple on the list that are different from nation to nation.
Yeah.
So that gives it some Napoleonic flavor and some nationality flavor, but not compared to other rule sets. There's probably not enough flavor for your old grognards.
Right.
But again, for an average person who's not, experienced in Napoleonic warfare, I think there probably is enough there for them. But
not for you, Dave. I can hear it coming. Not for you.
I did hit it pretty hard.
You are an old grognard
in that category. I gave it a 4.
Ah, okay.
Again, I just wanted to see the troops behave differently. It's like a lot of troops have the same value stats, and
Yes.
it's only the trait that makes them slightly different.
Yeah, I agree. I, too, am an old grognard. So I gave it a 5. Average. It's average historical flavor, which is kind of what you'd expect from a 4-page game. So I feel like a little bad that we're like, criticizing it here. In 4 pages, they did a good job. There are unit traits. They do have the fate cards. You do get the essence of Napoleonic warfare with the formation changes and the way the battle unfolds. But at the same time, I'm with you that it felt like there were missed opportunities. And actually, the biggest missed opportunity, in my opinion, is the Fate deck. We didn't talk a whole lot about this in mechanics. I know there's going to be people maybe watching this review who say, I'm not into card-driven mechanics, so this Fate card sounds like something I wouldn't be interested in. I'm actually not into card-driven mechanics either, but the Fate cards aren't that. They don't decide who gets to activate.
Right.
They're just little bits of flavor. They might allow you to do a re-roll. They might allow you to slow down an enemy unit of your choice as they hit unexpected bad going. They're just little ways to influence the game tactically. But that would have been a really good place to get more of the historical flavor in. As it is, the Fate cards are all just really generic bonuses. Our last category is support. What is available for the game if you're a new player trying to get into it? And this is a brand new game, so that's another factor you have to keep in mind for support. And again, it's all free, which is also something weighing on my mind as I think about the score for this game. What do you think in terms of what's out there?
Currently, you have a rule set. You have a few army lists.
Yes, all the major powers.
Correct. And they are promising that they are going to produce army lists for at least all the figure lines that they produce.
Sure.
Now, thankfully, they produce a hell of a lot of figures. And they are going to expand this to other periods also.
Yes, I heard American Civil War. And there's at least one other one. Was it Franco-Prussian for their new Franco-Prussian range?
They could. I mean, honestly, you could extend this either direction time-wise.
You could, and that, I think, kind of touches back to some of the comments we had in historical flavor about it being a little generic. This rule set would be very easily applicable to other wars.
Currently, because there is not a whole lot there, I ended up only giving it a 5, an average score. But I would love to actually come back to this and revisit it later and be able to give it a 10.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be fantastic if they could and would flesh this out into a larger publication with lots of eye candy.
Right.
Scenarios.
Yes.
And army lists, even like theater-specific ones. I think that there is a lot of potential room for a lot of growth with this. And look, I'll be the first one. I felt kind of dirty giving it a low score.
It's a free game, Dave.
In historical and support. But I'm actually kind of excited about the possibility that this set of rules holds for the future?
Well, I went a little higher than you. I went with a 6 for support. The Perrys do have a section on their website where you can go to download everything. We'll put a link to that in the description. Scenario-wise, I think there's 3 generic scenarios on the Perry website, like, meeting engagement, which is fine. I'd love to see some more historical stuff, like the Montebello scenario that we put out. I, like you, am hoping that we can grow this into a higher score than a 6. But right now, it's brand new, and it's kind of just getting started.
And honestly, if I can kind of pigeon and kind of dovetail into something else, when you were talking about those fate decks.
Yeah, the fate cards.
And we said that they were somewhat generic.
Very, in my opinion.
If you actually had specific scenarios, you could tailor those fate tables
to the scenario. I agree completely.
And I think that would go a long way to adding, what we were looking for.
Yeah, and actually that'd be really easy to do because it's just a table. It's a printed table on a piece of paper, and you use playing cards, standard poker playing cards. So it would be very easy to write up a table that was just for a historical scenario. That way you could randomize, the arrival of reinforcements, or, General Lon getting shot and killed in the battle, There's all kinds of Napoleonic flavor and stuff that you could pack into that, which, that comes back to my comment under the historical flavor. Like, that's, to me, that was the biggest missed opportunity, because while I agree with you that I would love to see this game printed like the deluxe version of Nevermind the Billhooks, with lots of eye candy, I don't need to see the rules grow beyond 4 pages. I'm actually very good with the fact that it's a 4-page game. So they could work within that existing framework, like with the Fate table, in order to expand the concept. So Dave, that brings us to our final review. I feel like I want to lead this off by saying I was surprised when I did my scores how low they were. My amalgamated score came out to a 61, which is a game that we would recommend. Anything from 60 to 70 we recommend, but it's on the low end of that for me. And I sat there thinking, like, well, how did that happen? Because I really like this game. And I think that the answer to that for me is all of the complaints I have about this game are things that are very easily fixable, even through house rules, some of which we have done, like, for example, the QRS. You mentioned tailoring the fate tables to the scenarios. That's all stuff you can do at home. Yeah. So the framework is there for a really good game that I actually really enjoyed, even though my score, as is, doesn't seem to reflect that.
I felt the same way. My score was a 65, and that felt low. Now, we've done enough rules reviews here that I know that in general, because of the, in a sense, rubric that we use, you do end up with scores being a little bit lower.
60 to 70 is a game we would recommend.
Right, because of those categories. And, when you ding them in support and you ding them in history, it does drag that number down. I will tell you this. Regardless of whether the math tells me this is a 65, I will tell you, I will play this game any day of the week because I thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, I was actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking to myself, I almost feel like, and I've mentioned this in other rule reviews, I almost feel like we should add another category. We've always, for years on Little Wars TV, there have been 5 rule review categories. I feel like at the end, in the final review, we should add a bonus category that's, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited would you be to play this again? Because there are plenty of games we've reviewed where I would tell you that, like, I'm not really that enthused about playing it again. This is a game I would give a pretty high score. If we were given a 1 to 10, I'd be like, 8 or 9. Like, Monday, if you're rolling out Valour and Fortitude, I'm very happy to play.
Yeah. If you haven't actually had a chance to give these rules a try, I would encourage you to download the PDF and give it a try. I think you really will enjoy it. And just in case you're not convinced, I think I can tease it. In the future, you will be seeing a Valour and Fortitude game of Napoleon in Egypt from us at Little Wars TV.
Yeah, that's a period Dave and I are particularly interested in, and the Perrys make some beautiful 28mm figures for Napoleon in Egypt. Now, we're thinking about it in a different scale. Maybe we leave the teases at that, Dave, because you and I are both painting our armies right now for Napoleon in Egypt.
Unless the Perrys want to give us some really nice 28mm Napoleonics.
We'll take them.
In which case, we will totally paint those.
Well, there you have it, guys. There's our rule review for Valor and Fortitude. We want to wish all of you a very happy new year, a great 2023 ahead. And again, we hope that you will check these rules out. Links will be in the description below. If you've already played Valor and Fortitude, why don't you let us know in the comments and tell us what you think.